Hello, everyone. How are you today? And today, as usual, I have a very respected guest with me, Dr. Miriam Parker. Dr. Miriam Parker has been a program director for about 25 years in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Atlanta Medical Center. She has been involved in recruiting many, outstanding physicians to US residency at the Atlanta Medical Center. In the years, she has also, effectively trained many well-respected physicians over the years. So I feel honored to have Dr. Miriam Parker with me to discuss about ERAS 2026 application updates during this year and all that. So I'll leave the floor to Dr. Miriam Parker to introduce herself, and we'll directly go to our discussion. And our viewers, I encourage you to forward your questions in the comment section, and at the end of the day, we will try to go through all your questions and address them one by one. And thank you again, Dr. Miriam Parker, to dedicate your valuable time to spend some time with us discussing about the ERAS application for the upcoming 2026 season. Thank you. Welcome again.
Well, thank you very much again for having me. I feel like I feel like we know each other pretty well at this point. We've done a few of these over the last year and a half or so, and so I'm happy to be back at this point in time, just as things are starting to ramp up. And I thought it would be, well, we thought actually it would be a good idea to come back and just to give you some thoughts about what you should be thinking at this point in the application cycle. And how to have a more effective, productive cycle this year. So that was really the things that I wanted to touch on. A few things that are kind of topics that repeatedly come up, not specifics in terms, I'm not going to speak specifics in terms of personal statements and ERAS applications. I mean, if you have questions afterwards, we can certainly, I can certainly try my best to answer those things. But this is sort of more an idea of how to approach this whole process, so that you don't drive yourself crazy, you don't drive the people around you crazy, and that you end up with the best application that you can possibly have. So I'll sort of leave it at that. I've been really excited this year to work again with people from Ethiopia and around the world. As many of you know, my Ethiopians have been near and dear to me for many years, having had many Ethiopians in my residency program. I started with one chief resident, and it just kind of morphed into many more. Excellence sort of follows excellence, so that's really what I'd like to say about that. But I've expanded, and I'm really honored to be able to help people from all over the world with their applications, with their interview skills, etc. So this year, I'm looking forward again to trying to assist as many people as I can to get over this last, really over the finish line, so to speak, and into residency.
That's beautiful, Dr. Parker. I remember, coming to your office about 6 or 7 years ago during my application season, and I had a wonderful meeting with you. What I mean? Even though it didn't really felt that I was applying for a job or residency spot, because you are really engaging, a very kind personality and all that. So, and like I always tell people, I really feel honored to work on this topic with you, because you have long years of experience on this matter, and nobody would guide people candidates more than you can do. So I really appreciate your time here. So I think, many people have worked, like you said, many people have worked with you last year, and the majority of them have successfully matched, and some of them with old graduates as well. I mean, people who have been graduated from medical school about 25 years ago or something like that. So that's really encouraging. So we'll come to that at the end of the day to show how important is mentorship and having a mentor beside you to guide you through the process, and we'll be highlighting on that one. But the first question I would like to pose to you would be about what are the things we can control in this entire process, and what are the things which are out of our hands, because people worry about their graduation year. Nothing can be done about that. Right. Some people really worry about their age. nothing can be changed, right? So I would like you to highlight on those things which we can control and those things which we cannot really control, because people have to know that.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. I mean, we can't control our age, we can't control our sex, we can't control our parents. That's what I was always told, you know. Maybe
Yeah.
sometimes I wanted to ditch my parents, but they were my parents, so I was stuck. In this process, I think the things that people will concentrate on, for instance, very much so, are their scores. And certainly, if you're at a point where you're going to take one of the step exams, then it is something you can control. And I see too many people really relinquishing control of their step scores because they rush to get them in, and they're not as successful as they would like to be. But for many people at this point in time, your grades are done. Most of the rotations or anything you can do like that are finished. Your scores are in, and so you cannot control those things. Those are on paper. They're done, and there's no really point except figuring out potentially how you may address something on your ERAS application or on your personal statement. Those are in the past now. And the concentration needs to be on the application and the parts of the application that you control. And then once you turn in your application and you get interviews, how you can control the preparation and the confidence that you bring to your interview. So, controlling what you can, control what you can, and forget about the things that you can't control, because you're going to use excess energy that you really don't have on those things. And this process is hard, as you know more than I do probably, and that you have to conserve your energy. And the application process in general takes time. It takes energy to get to the end of it. So that's what I would say, the things that you can control. So what can you control? You can control your personal statement. You can control your ERAS application. You should be able to control your letters of recommendation to a certain extent. And I think we'll probably talk about those a little bit later. Those are really things you can control. How you present yourself to the world, you can control that. So there are many things that are in your control that you may not think of them as being things that are in your control, but they truly are.
Yes, that is the most important thing to highlight on. And the other thing you can potentially control is the connections you are creating with other people, right? So, trying to reach out to people on timely matter, because some people would wake up at the end of, by the deadline, and, oh, hey, Fakada, I'm applying for US residency, can you help me? Oh, the damage is done. There were people who were reaching out to me in December. What can I do in December? Some people reach out to you in November, and by that time, most probably most of the programs have already, given all the spats for interviews, and there is no hope at that point. So I think the connections we create on timely basis and some of the things we have highlighted are very important things to emphasize on. So I do have about 82 people watching on TikTok, and I would like to say a few things to them, because some people may not be aware of what's going on. So today I'm discussing with Dr. Miriam Parker, who is a very seasoned physician, board certified internist. She has been a program director at Atlanta Medical Center in Atlanta, Georgia for about 25 years. So we are discussing about US residency application for 2026 cycle. So if you do have questions for Dr. Parker as well as for me, you can raise them at the end of the day, okay? All right, so let's go back again. So, what is the cost of procrastination? Because most people do have the tendency to procrastinate, to do things. I am one of them.
Well, I think everybody has a little bit of that in them, right? It's just a matter of the degree.
I agree.
So it's interesting. This year, I offered an early bird special, right? I said, okay, if you get your ERAS application and your personal statement done early on, I'll give you a significant discount. Very few people took me up on that, which said to me, that was interesting. They either believed that they weren't ready, or they just weren't ready to do it at that time. I'm not sure what the situation was, but I probably only had about 12 people who actually, 12 people maybe who took me up on that. What I find is there some way to decrease the feedback? I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Oh, what kind of feedback are you getting?
I'm hearing myself, like echo.
Oh, echo. So probably I will mute my crowd. I will be muting myself. So go ahead and try it now.
Okay. Yeah, that's working better. So I think when I think about procrastination, the personal statement is the thing that people often procrastinate a lot with, because they realize how hard it is. They realize that it has to be a very succinct statement of sort of a purpose, a value that you bring. And it also has to be interesting. You want it to be a little bit different from other people's. It's not easy to do. It is a challenge, and you should see it at that. See it as a challenge and recognize that you're going to have to go through potentially several drafts of it. You may write one personal statement and then decide you don't really like it, and you scrap it and you write another personal statement. So, part of the idea of personal statements is not to be wedded, not to marry the first personal statement. It's like you don't marry the first person you go out and on a date with, probably. Don't marry the first personal statement you write or the first thoughts about it, because you're probably going to change your mind a lot of the time. You want to be able to, at the end of the season, to have a personal statement and an ERAS application that you can feel really good about and you can feel confident about, and that you can feel, I think most importantly, that after all the work that you've done, after the medical training and all of the sacrifices that you've made to get to this point, the money, the time, the effort, the family, sacrifices, you want to make sure that you've done everything that you can, that you have an application that you think is the best it can possibly be. So to me, the greatest cost of procrastination is a subpar application and a lack of confidence that you go in on that day in September when you certify your submission, that you feel like, I have my doubts. I should have worked harder. You just don't want to feel that. It's too much money. It's too much effort. It's too much time, hopes, dreams, all those things. So that's what I would say about the cost of procrastination in this. So if you're a procrastinator, I would advise you to try to overcome that. Try to set yourself a schedule. I tell people who are having a hard time, start with your ERAS application. Okay, the ERAS application is an experience at a time, a section at a time you have to fill out. Do one experience a night. I mean, there are 10 experiences. Write one each night until you get it done. And then for a few more nights, write a few extra ones, because you don't know which ones you're going to necessarily have. It's not so hard if you take it step by step. You can come back to it, but do something every day on your application. Something every day on your application.
I think that's very important, Dr. Parker. Thank you so much again. Because if you start late and you have limited time amount to complete your application, and as well as to reach out to people to get letter of recommendations and to write your personal statement, things will get messed up because everything will be jammed at the end of the day, and whatever you do is going to be hasty and it's going to be suboptimal, I would say. And you wouldn't get the chance to go through it again and again and make it perfect, because your grammar would be screwed. So many spelling and grammatical errors would be there, and you wouldn't have enough time to deal with it, to do it in a perfect manner. So I think stop procrastinating, guys, and get the job done at the earliest possible time. And it's always good to be ahead of time, because you will have ample time to go through the process, see it, and ask people to look into it in your behalf, and you will get it to perfection by the end of the day. So that's a very important point. So let's talk a little bit about letter of recommendations. One of the things I notice, because I do get a lot of requests from people mainly from Ethiopia. Many medical students reach out to me asking for letter of recommendations, and when I look into their profile, probably they just graduated last year, and I have left Ethiopia 9 years ago. So We don't have any connection whatsoever. I have never worked with them. I have never taught them and things like that. So I try to be as diplomatic as possible because people are desperate and I don't want to hurt their feelings. But at the same time, I want people to understand those kind of questions are inappropriate and they are also illegal, right? So I want you to emphasize on letter of recommendations, their importance, who should be our letter writer, and does it matter if you get a letter of recommendation from US versus like international doctors? It could be like somebody from Ethiopia, somebody from India, or some other place where they are originally coming from. So I want you to emphasize on this matter and the importance of letter of recommendations in the entire process. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess there's a lot of moving parts to all of this. But the first thing that I would say is the quality of the letter of recommendation matters a lot. And it's very easy to read a letter and to quickly understand whether or not this individual has any real connection with you or not. So, in this example that you're giving me, somebody reaching out doesn't know you, knows that you trained in the United States, thinks that a letter from somebody, of your stature with your letterhead and all that is going to be helpful to them. They're really not right in that, in thinking that. You can't write anything substantive about that person. What could you possibly write? We come from the same country. They trained at my school. I've looked at their application. They have good grades. I don't know anything about them as a person, but here you are. I recommend that you review their application. There's really not much you can say. And those letters are people do write them. I mean, I've had people in this country that we all knew. They wrote letters for every single person that you would see every single application season. And it was always about that they knew you when you were a student or something like that. And they were very limited in what they could say. So I would say in general, those letters are not useful to you. Now, if you have someone in this country that has come here that worked with you in Ethiopia and that knows you well and can write a credible letter about your professional attributes, your work ethics, your knowledge base, that's different. Then those letters are very helpful if you have somebody from the US that also knew you from Ethiopia that can vouch for things about you. Getting letters from individuals who are, like, let's say you did a residency in Ethiopia from whoever was your program director there. I still think those letters are very valuable. Again, they need to be very descriptive about your work, what you did, your excellent qualities, and they need to recommend you in the highest possible fashion. So there are keywords that they need to use in those letters, and of course that's with the caveat that that's true, that you really were an excellent resident, right? We're not trying to put words in people's mouths, but those letters can really help you. There are some individuals who would claim that there's no substitute for letters from U.S. doctors. I think that's really dependent on the program director and how they feel about that. Certainly, if you have letters from people who know you here, or you have, and most Ethiopians can't because you can't get visas to come here and do rotations. But if you were somebody who was lucky enough to be able to do that, then those letters are valuable. But that's really what I would say. Now, in terms of letters of recommendation, I think here's where I say you can control things. Because oftentimes individuals just say, I asked somebody for a letter of recommendation. If you think about what you're asking them to do, it's quite a bit. To write a good letter of recommendation takes time. It takes effort. Some people don't like writing. Some people do like writing. But whether you like writing or you don't like writing, it's a time commitment on the part of the person, unless they've asked you to write the letter yourself, which, that's a whole other discussion. But let's say they agree and they say, I would be delighted to write a letter for you. And you haven't worked with them for 3 years, but they remember you. What should you do? Well, first, I think you should, if possible, meet with them personally. Bring your resume. Talk to them about what you've been up to and remind them about how meaningful your relationship with them was when you worked with them. Remind them of when you worked with them, which ward you were on. If there were specific things that you really think they're going to remember about you, highlight them, because that helps them. It helps them write a memorable letter. So this concept of just calling someone up saying, hey, will you write me a letter, is fine, but I think you need to consider the importance of this letter, what you're really asking them to do, which is considerable, and to take it with a serious intention. And that means to come with them with a proposal, so to speak, of what you've actually done, how you've worked with them, your resume, highlighting things that you believe are really your strong points, because you would like to see those things incorporated into the letter, and it's probably likely that they will.
I think you have raised very important and valid points, because the majority of the times, you may be away from the letter writer, like geographically, and these things you have mentioned may not be practical, but at least one can go for some virtual meeting via Zoom, or FaceTime, or any video call for that matter, and try to remind them how you made them, how you worked with them, with what capacity, and things of that sort, because that's very important. Because some people may agree to write a letter of recommendation, and they may just upload some letter which they have written 10 years ago for somebody else, or 12 years ago, or a year ago. The duration doesn't matter, but they just use some generic letter for everybody, and who cares? You know what I mean? Who cares is you as an applicant, but the letter writer may not be that much invested in this. They just say, okay, I'll write it for you, and then they will generate some random letter and they will give it to you, and it's not gonna help you. But if you sit down with whoever is your letter of writer, and as far as that person has worked with you and knows you very well, then that letter would be very valuable. Yeah. So you have to know that. So somebody, his name is Dagan Balai from YouTube, has asked, what about letter of recommendation from tele rotations in the US? Is it valuable? I raised it now because it's really linked. Connected to.
Yeah, I mean, I get asked these things, and I say to you, what did you do on that tele rotation? Is there anything that did they know you? Did you examine patients virtually? Did you have interactive sessions with anybody? If you just observed somebody, if you just observed someone else doing a physical exam and you were just on the line, what are they going to write about you? If they write anything that they think is meaningful, they're just lying about it. So I get it. Part of the reason people pay a lot of money for these rotations, and it's a business on the other end, but they pay a lot of money for these because they think this letter is going to be valuable. And I think it's only valuable if you had some kind of connection, and there can be some kind of, during the sessions, Dogum asked really insightful, interesting questions. He stood out from the rest of his group, because of his curiosity, his interest, his understanding of pathophysiology, or something. But if those kinds of statements can't be made, it's sort of like, okay, it's like that. I came, I saw, I conquered. I came, I did a video rotation, I left. I don't think it really helps you. I really don't. Now, I suppose there's a few program directors out there, if they see a U.S., a U.S. heading on a letter, maybe they look at your application. But if you have anything else that you think is better, and any other rotations in the United States or from other countries outside of Ethiopia that you think support your application, and you believe that they could write stronger letters for you, then I would opt for those letters.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. I think that's very important. And those people who are investing your money in tele-rotations, you have to be mindful of all those circumstances, okay, before you sign up to any of those programs. So my next question is going to be about professional communications, because so many people try to reach out to as a professional on LinkedIn, because somebody might find your profile on LinkedIn, they follow you first. Once you approve their connection, then they come in the private inbox section sending you a message. So I have received a lot of weird communications from some individuals, so how important is professional communication, and how should we do it? Because it can potentially have it can backfire on us, right?
Sure, sure.
We may irritate and offend people. So I want you to highlight on professional communication styles and how well it should be done.
I would be delighted to, because I have certainly received my share of those kinds of emails as well. Um, but I want to say something first before even tackling that, and mention this, because I mention this actually quite often when I talk to my clients. There was a survey that's done periodically to program directors, and it asks them a lot of questions about various things related to the application process and the interview process and that sort of thing with residencies. But one of the questions that it's asked on some of the iterations of this questionnaire was, which qualities do you think are the most important qualities to ensure success in a residency program? The number one quality was professionalism. It outranked everything else. Your medical knowledge, your this, your that, it didn't matter. Professionalism. And what I tell people is professionalism means so many things, right? The ERAS application, and those of you who have heard me talk about that, the ERAS application is an application about professionalism. Your communication professionalism, your ethics, all sorts of things that go into professionalism. So just like asking someone for a letter of recommendation in a formal way and taking their time seriously and showing your seriousness of purpose, so too is communication on LinkedIn or wherever. I get many people who write, "Hey, Miriam." Can you imagine? "Hey, Miriam, I'd like to work with you. Hey, can I be I would like to be your mentee. Hey." It still stuns me, actually, that people write this, and I'm often at a loss to know how to respond to these people. And sometimes I don't, to be honest with you, because I'm really put off by it. I get the Dr. Miriams, and I know that that's, there's sort of a cultural thing where people don't necessarily know which name to use, but that too should not happen. You should understand, as a physician in Ethiopia or wherever you are in the world, that in this country we use last names. And to someone who's trying to get my attention and get my support, writing Dr. Miriam is probably not the right way to go about it either. So you defer to the formality unless for some reason the person asks you to call them something different. That is the number one rule, right? Wherever you go. I'm sure that you don't go up to professors in Ethiopia and say, "Hey, hey, whatever." Can you imagine? I mean, your grade would probably go to the toilet, I would imagine. I think they would
You'll be sent home directly from the
send you to the psychiatrist. I don't know. But it would obviously be inappropriate and would be outside of the standard, so to speak. So I would implore you in your conversations, in your communication with people, to be very formal. It really stands out to me when somebody is formal in their letter writing, in their communication, and there's a deference. There's a deference to recognizing that that person can choose to help you or not. They can choose to do all sorts of things potentially if they want to, and if they feel so inclined. And so you have to show the utmost of respect to individuals when you reach out to them. And reaching out at the last minute does not show respect to them, right? It doesn't show respect. Reaching out ahead of time, saying that you are hoping that you can get their help during the application process or whatever it is, that's a different story. Making them aware that you're going to be asking for these things and then formally go through the process. In addition to, communication with individuals, I would also say that your communication profile is important. And that would be mostly LinkedIn, right? Because everybody, for Facebook and things like that, people don't necessarily use their real names. I mean, especially in this day and age with everything that's going on in the world, I think people are very, very cautious now, or hopefully you are very, very, very cautious about the things that you put out there. But LinkedIn, For instance, I get people all the time on LinkedIn that want to, they want to, whatever it is, they want to join me, and they send me an invitation or send me a request, and they have almost a completely blank page, no picture, no nothing. Just, I'm a student or something. I don't respond to those. I don't know who you are. I don't know anything about you. It may say that you're a friend of a friend, an acquaintance of somebody. I don't. You need to have a nice profile picture. You need to have a blank background or something that's appropriate. Nothing, obviously, nothing political, nothing that you think might be funny or entertaining. This is not funny or entertaining time on LinkedIn. It's serious, it's professional. That's what you have to communicate in everything that you do, because lots of programs will look. And I do look too. I look at people's LinkedIn profiles. I've told them to take down their pictures and put different pictures on their LinkedIn. Don't put a picture, of you in some inappropriate clothing or in too casual of a way. It should be a formal, professional shot on LinkedIn. That is what that is for.
I think those points are really important. Some people might be posting a picture from the beach with bikinis. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but things of that sort, you know what I mean? And the communication style and the profile we are putting there should be honest and transparent. Most people are not transparent when they're listing their accomplishments in the education section and work experience sections. That's very important. So like you mentioned, when somebody sends me a message, I go to the profile section and I try to see their profile in detail so that I know how to approach them. For example, if somebody is asking me for a letter of recommendation, I go to the front page, to the profile page, to see their year of graduation, where did they study. Obviously, if they have studied in Gondar or Jimma, which is outside of Addis Ababa, I have never been to those places. You know what I mean? I have never taught there. I have never worked there. I have never been there physically. So there is no way I can write a letter of recommendation for people coming from those places. And for those places, people coming from AAU, Addis Ababa University, I look into their graduation year to see if the timeline is matching or not, because my ex-students, they come forward and ask me for a letter of recommendation, and I remember most of them, and I ask them key questions, or I ask them to send me pictures and all that, and then that way I try to see if I can possibly help them with a letter of recommendation. So it's very important. Then you have to be polite, you have to be respectful. And I know there is a cultural difference in Ethiopia. We mainly go by our first names. So people would call me Dr. Fakada Selassie, but here my name is Dr. Mogas. So you need to know and understand the cultural differences, because it could be potentially offensive, So you have already highlighted all those important points, and thank you for that. So finally, let's go through the changes which are made in the ERAS application for the 2026 season. And then at the end of the day, I would give you the opportunity to highlight on the success stories from the previous year, which is 2025 application season. And we'll start taking questions from our audiences.
There's not much to tell you about any changes, which is kind of good. There are some questions now that have been added for specific specific specialties. Neurosurgery has questions, anesthesia has questions, plastic surgery has questions. It's kind of interesting to see whether in the future each specialty will have a question or two that, it's sort of like an additional question that they want answered about your motivation or something to go into that particular specialty. But most Ethiopians are not applying to anesthesia, neurosurgery, or plastic surgery because of for many reasons. But anyway, so it really probably won't pertain to you. The other new thing on the section is that there was always this difficulty in trying to figure out, well, I actually did a residency in my home country, but it's not ACGME approved residency. There doesn't seem to be any place to put it on my application. And you can list your residencies, because now there's other residencies. So you can list residencies that are not ACGME, and I would encourage people who have done residencies to put that down, because even though I know some people say, oh, it doesn't matter if you did a residency in your other country or not, I think for many people it really does. So I would urge anybody to put that down. There may have been some changes in some of the signaling. I haven't followed exactly what the changes are from last year, if any, to this year, but I can tell you that there's only 4 programs right now that are doing the tiered signaling with gold and silver. Most of the other programs are just doing silver, one level signaling. So there may be a few programs that have changed the number of signals you get, but for instance, most of the ones that I deal with commonly have not. So it's really not much. It's really very little changes. They've made a few things in parts of the application that you wouldn't even notice, that I don't even think are important necessarily, but that there is this opportunity to put your training in there, which is important.
I think it's a good news that there is no much change, because especially for those individuals who haven't successfully matched last year, so what they need to do from their end is going to be very limited. And other than adding those experiences which happened over the past year. So I think it's good that there is no much change.
Well, except I would say the people who haven't matched need to always take their application from last year in a very, in a way where a dispassionate way, and look at it and maybe with support and try to figure out, were there things that, didn't work out so well? Could they substitute? Could they put a different spin on things? So I think it's always the right thing to review your application and figure out if there was something else that you could do differently this year. And maybe not, but maybe, there may be some tweaks to the application.
I think that's very important as well, because you can't copy paste in its entirety, and there was something.
Yeah, the heart rate changed. I don't know.
If that application didn't take you anywhere, then definitely the same thing would happen this year as well. So it's wise to also have a mentor like Dr. Parker. I'm not advertising her service, by the way, guys. I mean, it's up to you to choose to sign up or not. But at the end of the day, especially if you haven't successfully matched last year, I encourage you guys to have somebody to guide you in this important application season. Some people, I know the majority of the people do have financial constraints and they want to save money. And, when you do the application for the first time, you are overconfident, right? So because, we all have a success stories up to this level, and we think we can conquer this one as well. But definitely US residency application is unique in many ways. So I think you need to really think about having somebody to mentor you and all that. So let's start answering questions. And I have displayed the question here. The first one is from Emmanuel Mulugeta. What are the real values of connections, and how could a connection practically help you? So I think he's trying to say, how can we make connections with residents in the US, with attendings in the US, and how can that help?
Well, you certainly should try to exploit connections if you have them. Okay, so if you know people that are in other residency programs that have come before you, you definitely should reach out to them. And you can try to reach out to other people. Let's say there are Ethiopians that are in a program that, or let's say did some other kind of program that you were in. Let's say you were part of a I don't know, some kind of global health something, and you see that there are people that you were in your cohort and are in a particular program. I would say by all means reach out to them if you have some kind of a connection with them. What can they do for you? They can potentially go to the program director or the committee or however it works in their place and say, listen, would you take a second look at this person? I think they're really qualified and I'd really like you to give them the opportunity to interview with us. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. The other thing is, you never know, the person that you reach out to that you are asking for assistance, you don't know if they're the program director's favorite or if they're somebody the program director doesn't really like. So it can work against you, I suppose. But I think most of the time, connections, what can they do? They can get your application on somebody's desk. I mean, we don't put them on the desk anymore because they're all online, but it can potentially encourage the program director to look at your application. Once, if you get an interview, then it's all up to you and your interview. That person has done their job at that point in terms of helping you. I do know anecdotally, and of course, lots of people will say, I got interviews at places where I reached out to individuals who recommended me, and so I think there is real truth to that. The other thing, though, is think about it. If there's someone that you know there, but every other Ethiopian that applied to that program also reached out to them, in fact, this is what used to happen in my program. I would get somebody and they would come with me with a list and they would say, I have 10 people I want you to look at, Dr. Parker. And I would say, come back later. I want you to hone that list down to 2 people, because I couldn't do it. And it put them in a bad situation, I know, because they said, how can I do that? How can I just make a decision about which one of these people, because they're all great? I said, they're not all great. You have to have people that, or maybe they're all great, but maybe there are 2 that are greater than the rest, or 2 that you really, for whatever reason, want to see here. So I'm going to force you to tell me who you think are the best candidates if you want me to take a look at them, because I'm not going to just look at every single person's folder.
I think those are 2 important things.
You may be competing with a whole bunch of other people, especially if it's a program where there's many, many Ethiopians that apply to that program.
Yes, I think you raised a very important concept there, because for the majority of international medical graduates, it's really important to have a connection in a program, because like you just mentioned, that resident who is in that program can personally go to the program director's office or go and connect with the program coordinators and give your name and your ERAS application number, identification number, and all that. That would motivate, especially if that person is a favorite. If that person is liked by the program in its entirety, then your chances of getting invitation from those places would be very, very high. So I think I encourage people to reach out people ahead of time, because if I have already recommended 2 people and the rest would show up by the end of the application season, that's not going to help you, because everybody will tell you, just like Dr. Parker said, just minimize the list, please, because I cannot review 20 applications, 30 applications. And for that matter, if there are 2, 3, 4 Ethiopian residents in that program and everybody comes with a long list, so that can't happen practically, and there should be diversity also from the program's perspective. Right. So I think you need to be mindful of that, but at the same time, reach out to people at the earliest possible time. So back in the days, Dr. Parker, there used to be a list of residents in different programs and the names of residents in different programs from all over the US, and including their phone number and everything. So some people were courageous enough to kind of come up with that list. So if you find those kind of lists, you can randomly try, but be cautious in your communication. You don't know these people, so be respectful, be polite, and be professional when you reach out to these people to recommend your name to programs. So try your best and see, somebody whom you didn't expect might help you. So you never know. So next question, Dr. Parker, is hello, Dr. FSH and Dr. Parker. FHM. My name is not FHM. Come on. I abbreviated to FSH. You see. Dr. Parker, thank you for doing this. My question would be, number 1, how important is signaling? Would it be wise to apply to programs I did signal? And number 2, how important are informal recommenders like residents and attending physicians physically vouching in your behalf? We just discussed about this, so you can probably address the first question, how important is signaling, and would it be wise to apply to programs that I did signal? Obviously, if you signal, you have to apply, right?
I mean, the signaling is very important. If you look, so you have to look at it sort of across the board, okay? Because there are people who only got interviews at signaled programs. There are individuals who got no interviews at signaled programs, but got interviews at programs they didn't signal. But if you look at it, so, anecdotal information is not helpful, right? It's just not. But when you look at it across the board, for instance, in medicine, a gold signal means a lot more than a silver signal, which means a lot more than a no signal in terms of overall and your chances of getting an interview at that program. I mean, there's a reason that people are looking at signals. There are programs that only are looking at their signal candidates because they have too many applicants. So if you really want to go to a program, you should consider signaling it. But when you decide to signal a program and use one of your precious, if it's medicine, it's 3 gold signals. When you decide to signal a program, you have to decide, am I competitive in this program? How many other people that look just like me are going to be applying to this program? Because if you apply to a program where there's, let's say, 90% IMGs, and of those IMGs, a significant proportion of those, come from the same region of the world, then your gold signal is going to be diluted by all the other gold signals because everybody else is thinking, I'm an IMG, and that program has a lot of IMGs, 90% IMGs. If I apply, and they've had a good track record of Ethiopian, so if I apply there and use my gold signal, it's going to be a real boost and I'll probably get in. And the problem is, so is every other Ethiopian that is applying and they're using their gold signal there. And some of them, may have a better application than you do. So it's not just using your signal, it's how you use your signal, where you use your signal. And if you use a signal, let's say, and you have a personal connection there, that's pretty good. Okay. If you feel like that would be a very appropriate use of a signal.
I think those are very important things, and I couldn't agree more. So listen to that. So the next question is from Nabiyu Burri. Greetings, Dr. FSH and Dr. Parker. As an older IMG, I have been reviewing application strategies and came across several sources suggesting that IMGs often need to apply to 100 plus programs to secure a reasonable number of interviews. I wanted to ask for your perspective on this. Do you agree with this approach, or would you recommend a more targeted strategy because it's super expensive to apply to all those programs?
Well, I have not seen, it is in the data, and I gotta say, I haven't followed that particular, the data on the numbers, but most people do apply to at least 100 programs. Okay. Every so often I have had candidates who applied to 35 programs and got a spot. And I thought they were incredibly lucky. But they targeted programs, I guess, fairly. They really did their work and they got lucky to some extent. So 100 programs is not actually a lot of programs to apply to. I've had people who applied to far more programs, but obviously their economic decisions about all of this. I would say after you go this far, and again, I can't speak to, individuals' pocketbooks, but I've had many people who I also, who didn't match. And then I said to them, well, tell me about your application last year. And they said, I applied, to 45 programs. And it's hard to, I say, well, that probably was part of the problem because it is a statistics game. To some extent, if you're expecting to apply to 100 programs and get maybe a 5% rate of interviews and you only apply to a third of those programs, then you have 1 program or 2 programs going into your match list, and that is going to drastically reduce your chances of getting a residency. I think the answer, though, to your question is really very dependent on the individual. There's certainly programs that make no sense to apply to. If they say they don't want people that are out 3 years outside of a certain age group, then I wouldn't apply to those programs. I think that pretty much is wasting your money.
Yes, I completely agree with you. You need to really apply to those IMG-friendly programs, as much as possible. You cannot apply to 10 programs and expect 10 out of 10 interview invitations from those limited numbers. It's not really practical. Just like you said, it's just a statistics game, and you have to be smart. So people do apply more than 100 programs, but what matters is where are you applying is also what matters. Because if you are applying to these Ivy League university hospitals in the US, that's not going to happen, and you are just wasting your money. You have to be practical. I know everything is possible in this world. You may end up matching to Harvard, but I'm not undermining anybody here. But we need to be really practical because remember, they do have their own medical students. You know what I mean? So every institution tries to make sure that their students are matching, right, Dr. Parker? So you can really talk a little bit further on this matter. So every institution tries to make sure that their medical graduates are matching that year. That means they will always rank their candidates to the higher numbers. So remember, so if you are applying to Ivy League programs where there is an undergraduate medical school, practically your chances of matching there is zero. So you have to be mindful of that. Don't waste your money. But you can apply to many IMG friendly, community based programs, and that way you kind of boost your chances. That's how I see it, Dr. Parker.
Yeah, I think it's a realistic game. I mean, there may be a few candidates here and there that actually have IMGs that have the potential to apply to top programs and potentially get an interview there, but they're really few and far between. Because of that fact, they're going to take US grads unless there's some incredible exception, to the rule.
And especially you need to have some sort of connection with that institution. So you cannot come out of a blue and get matched somewhere. They need to know you.
I mean, don't discount too that there are individuals who, if you look on a program's profile, who may be in that university program, you don't know if they did rotations there. You don't know, they could have been from a country where, unlike Ethiopia, where you can't get your B-1-2 visas, where they can get their visas, they come here, they do rotations at that institution while they're a medical student, they become a known entity. They may have tons of research. Their uncle may be the head of some department. I mean, there's a lot of things that you just don't know. But it's a very, very hard thing to get one of, even for a US grad, it's very hard to get one of those positions, particularly if you're applying to a competitive specialty. I mean, I personally think that's in a way, throwing money down the toilet. Recognize that if you go into internal medicine, and that's the majority of the people that I work with, right? There are great opportunities if you decide to go into fellowship training after residency where you can go to top university programs. You can, if you perform well as a resident, you can go to good programs, really good programs. And sometimes that's just, I mean, I had people, my community program, I went Atlanta Medical Center. It was a, medium-sized community program in the middle of Atlanta. It was only known really to the programs in Atlanta or in Georgia. Okay, I had people that went to Harvard. I had people that went to UCSF, University of San Diego, University of San Francisco, Chicago. They went there for their fellowships. So it's really possible to do those things. But trying to get to those places first is very difficult. And I think, is for most people, it's a waste of money.
I completely agree with you. So the majority of the time, people tend to focus on university programs is just to increase their chances of matching, fellowships in competitive specialties as well as competitive programs. But like you just said, do your residency somewhere, get your foot into the US, medical system, work hard during residency, get good letters, do research as much as possible. Then you can eventually, match to any program in the US because you will become effectively a US graduate and as well as a very competitive, individual in the process. So Nathaniel said, I second the second. What is the weight of US residents recommendation letter? I haven't seen, US.
You mean a US resident recommending you?
Yeah, I think a letter of recommendation.
I would never get one of those. I don't think they're valuable. One of the things that I tell people when they're getting a letter from somebody, and it's not somebody like a program director who's used to writing letters, I say you need to coach them and talk to them about in a nice way, in a way that isn't insulting, because a letter usually starts with something like, I'm pleased to write this, letter of recommendation for so and so. I have worked as a program director for the last 20 years at X, Y, and Z, and therefore feel well equipped to be able to judge this individual, in comparison to his or her peer group. I worked with this person for X number of weeks or months or whatever it is on X service with daily contact. So you're trying to establish your credibility, and you're trying to establish the relationship that you had with that person, so the rest of the letter has meaning, and so that you give the context in which that person and you worked with them, and then any further contact that you had with them over the years. With a resident who writes a letter for you, I don't know what they can say. I mean, I don't. Again, if they're a resident in this country that was a professor in Ethiopia and was your teacher when you were on like a medical service there, then maybe you could use a letter like that. But if it's just somebody who knows you, that's a friend of yours, that's writing a letter on your behalf as a resident, I would think that would carry very little weight.
I have written a couple of letter of recommendations while I was a resident here.
Yeah.
But just like you said, because I was an assistant professor in AAU, and those applicants, candidates were my students in Ethiopia. So that was my reason to write that letter of recommendation, and I do outline where exactly I've worked with them, in what capacity, and what was our relationship, and things like that was included in those letters. And they have used my letter in that sense. But if somebody who is just doing residency and has never done anything in Ethiopia, and there is no way that person was your mentor or something like that, I think that letter is not going to help much.
Yeah.
You have to differentiate between the two. So, Melat Sisa, I didn't really understand your question, but it says, does it really matter to have a lot of rotation or letter of recommendation, like more than 2 out of 3? I don't know what you are trying to say. Of course, you are supposed to be submitting at least 3 letter of recommendations and maximum 4, right? Including one from a department head or something like that. So, do you get the question sense?
I mean, you should submit 4 letters. I mean, you have 4 opportunities. I think it's like crazy to submit 3, because it's sort of like the assumption then is I don't have anybody else that would write a letter for me. That's not good. So you need 4 letters. I always would recommend 4 letters. And rotations, I mean, if you're talking about rotations in this country, for instance, personally, I don't think more than 3 rotations is really going to be beneficial to anyone. I had a guy last year. He was an Indian guy. He had like 15 rotations in the United States. He just kept doing them over and over and over again. There was a reason he didn't get in, but it wasn't because he didn't have enough rotations on his record. There was other reasons behind that. But I think he drove everyone crazy that he worked on a rotation list. I'm not sure what the quality of his letters were like. But no, I don't think so. You need to, credible rotations, if you do them in the United States, which are hard to find, where somebody can really write a letter attesting to your skill set and everything. That's what's important, not that you've done X number of months.
I think that's very important. It's a waste of energy, waste of time. And at the end of the day, it's not going to be productive. Just, work with 1 or 2 people and try to get a very strong letter of recommendation from those people. If you say you have been rotating to 15 different places, then the assumption is going to be you spend so little time in each program, then even if you get a strong letter of recommendation, I would assume that's just, fiction, you know what I mean? Because you didn't even spend much time with that person to get that kind of a strong letter of recommendation. So you need to be kind of balancing between the two. Mm-hmm. So the next question is, what is the importance of clinical research in the weight of an application? For someone working in the pharmaceutical industry, is it viewed positively or considered as a potential experience outside of clinical experience?
Okay, so let's just deal with clinical research to begin with. So, depending on what what area, what specialty you're applying, what kinds of programs you're targeting. I think, clinical research or any kind of research and publications for that matter, either can matter a lot or matter very little. Okay. Certainly there are programs where the more research you have, the more publications you have, the better off you are, because they're sort of counting these things, and they're looking to be able to, they're looking for this idea that while you're going to be a resident, you're going to produce for them, and they're going to be able to demonstrate that they're a place where a resident can come and do research and get fellowships and all these sorts of things. In terms of pharmaceutical research, is it viewed positively or considered as a potential experience? Well, if you've been involved in the pharmaceutical industry, there's certainly, I would imagine, research part aside, there is a professionalism level that you have probably learned from that experience. Whatever it is, that you can certainly introduce that experience into an application as an experience. I think that can be that could be interesting, actually. It just doesn't need to overwhelm the rest of your application. But yes, I wouldn't try to shy away from it. Does the number of publications matter? Yes, as I've said, in some specialties, they want to see publication. I mean, like I just had somebody I'm working with who's applying in urology, a female working in urology. She's not I have two females applying in urology. They both have like 40 papers on their application as residents. I mean, going into residency, they've been working in research with 40 publications, because that is what is required in that specialty to be competitive. But that's not common. I mean, that's not what you see in most people's applications. And a lot of people get into residency program, even internal medicine, with zero publications. Even though if you look online, some people would have you believe that you have to subscribe to these research mills and you have to get your name on a zillion publications with research that you haven't really even done yourself, and sort of push the boundaries of what I even believe is ethically, which is what is ethical, just to show that you have publications.
Yeah, we have got to be careful in that.
You can put down on your application that you have papers under review.
So you saw the question, right? So yeah, does the number of publications matter? And if someone has papers under review, does that help? I think it does.
Yeah, it counts. It's all a matter of where you're applying, what you're targeting. For instance, if you're an internal medicine doctor and you have a ton of places, but you only applied to small community programs, here's another way that they might look at that. They could look at that negatively, in a sense, because they could say to themselves, look at this person, they have all this publication, they're really gunning for something better than our program, so to speak. They want something more academic. They're not even going to come here if we give them an interview, so we're not going to waste our time. Yeah. So that's what I mean, is that when you decide where you're going to apply, you have to figure out where you fit. Because if you try to fit yourself into every single kind of program, it won't help you to be able to define what your application should look like.
I think that's very important. Some people go to, rural setup or to a community program, and then when the program director asks, what's your future, plan after residency? If they say, oh, I want to do cardiology, interventional cardiology, or hematology or GI, and there is no cardiology, GI, hematology fellowship in that program, then they say, okay, I think you better apply to other places where these places are available. You know what I mean? So then they think they shouldn't rank you high, because you are telling them they are not the perfect fit to your interests and future goals. So we have to be very diplomatic until we just, secure our spots in one of the residency programs, I would say. So the Half-Blood Prince, Befeqadu Abebe, I think his name is Befeqadu Abebe. This is what Dr. Parker was mentioning, the Half-Blood Prince. That is the name of the profile, but thankfully he has included his name. So if we had an unsuccessful matching attempt, how should we handle questions related to it in the interview session?
Well, honestly, that would be the first question. Nobody's going to ask you about that unless you bring it up. Okay. So there are questions that are typical in the interview setting, such as, tell me about a time that you failed. Tell me about a time when you didn't succeed in something that you tried to do that was important to you. Those are perfect opportunities that you can bring up a failed match. You also may choose not to bring up the failed match, and you may wish to talk about something else. It's not a requirement to talk about the fact that you didn't match. So I think it really, it behooves you in advance of interviews to understand how you're going to answer that question. And if you're going to bring up the match at all, because you're not obligated to do so.
Mm.
Remember that, however, that 60%, about 50%, 55% of people don't match. So it's not like you're in some huge minority if you don't match. I mean, it's very, very common. I have many, many people I work with all the time that haven't matched the first time around.
So you shouldn't be really ashamed of the fact that you haven't been matching.
Right. I think it's wonderful if people match the first time around, but there are some excellent, excellent, excellent candidates that don't match because, there is some of this that has to do with timing and connections and luck and economics and a whole variety of things. Sometimes you need to pursue and just keep going and apply a second time or a third time. Sometimes it takes more.
It takes more. I remember a couple of guys who have tried to, apply multiple times, and the secret is that never give up. Never give up. If you don't match the first time, that's okay. Second time, it's okay. Third time, it's okay. Keep going. You are investing some time, energy, and money as well. But as far as you are determined, you will get it at the end of the day. So, Dr. Parker, before we, address the other questions, I want you to take a couple of minutes to tell us about the success stories in 2025, application season, because I know for a fact that the majority of your candidates have successfully matched, and you have also broken some records in terms of people matching as an old graduates with a
We don't say
graduation. I would say old because I used to consider myself old candidate because at the time I applied, I was 12 years out of medical school. But some of my senior colleagues, they have successfully matched after graduating from a medical school about 25 years ago. So that's a big success. Not only one person, but at least I know 3 people who have matched after graduating more than 25 years from medical school. So let's go ahead and discuss a little bit about those achievements you have made with your candidates.
Well, last year, I've been running this thing for 2.5 years now, right? So I have 2 classes, as I see it, two classes of people. So the first year, when I started just exclusively doing, because I'm not doing program directorship anymore, right? I'm just doing exclusively this. So the first year I started kind of, I don't know, in October, really. That year I matched 46. I helped match. I wouldn't say I matched. I helped match 46 or 47 applicants, something like that, by the time it was all over. Last year, people that work with me, and on the official thing I have on my website, it says 91, but now I heard about 2 more people that matched that I didn't really know. They ended up matching later. So it's up to 93 people that I worked with that ended up matching, which is, it's pretty neat from my perspective. Because I put a lot of work into each candidate. And so it's very nice to see that kind of an outcome for everybody. And one of the things was they were from everywhere. I had a lot of Ethiopians. I think something like almost 50 out of those 93 people were Ethiopians. But I had people from Albania, and I've started coaching people from Argentina. I had people from the Caribbean, from India, from Pakistan, from, Saudi, many, many different places. So it has certainly grown for me in terms of the number of people that I feel like I've been able to support, and hope that this year will be no different, and that we'll have an even more successful match. I when I started this, I saw a lot of people you'll see it out there. You'll see people who say we have a 99% match rate. I don't even know how they do that. I mean, I suppose if you select the top 10% of the candidates that you work with, you could say with those people, I have a 100% match rate. But I've worked with everybody. As Dr. Moses has said, I've worked with people who failed, step one, failed step two, and then successfully matched. I've had people who were, graduated in 2002 or 2001. I think might have been the oldest candidate. I've had people who had zero publications. Almost everybody that I deal with India from Ethiopia does not have a step 3 score, does not have outside rotations because you can't come here. So I'm very pleased that and I think it attests to the quality of the individuals that I've worked with and the perseverance. And as was just mentioned, that perseverance spirit, that sense that you're really in this for the long run and that you've overcome all these obstacles and you're going to keep fighting for this really comes through loud and clear on an application. I would tell you that when they polled program directors again and asked about qualities in an individual and things in their application that have actually mattered to them, I would hope that this would make many of you happy. And that is that program directors in general value individuals who have had many obstacles to overcome to get here. It is actually a question, and it comes out on the list where that ranks in terms of importance on your application. And with some specialties, it ranks in the top 10 things. I mean, when you're looking at the MSPE and the letters of recommendation, your ERAS application, your personal statement, professionalism, teaching, mentorship, whatever, that concept of obstacles and overcoming them is in the top 10. And it says something, right? It says something about your resilience, your adaptability, your determination. You're not going to be a resident who's going to give up. You're going to find solutions to things. You're a problem solver. You can think critically about things. You take the long view, not the short view. I mean, all those kinds of things that I think many of you really do demonstrate amazingly on your applications that do convince people to take a chance.
So, I mean, I would like to ask you this question. So, how many different specialties did people go into? I mean, amongst your clients?
It was about, I guess I had 8 or 9 specialties. So I had medicine. Of course, the majority was medicine, family medicine, pediatrics, pathology, neurology, anesthesia, diagnostic radiology, prelims, TY years.
Dermatology as well, right?
Dermatology the year before. I didn't work with anybody.
Oh, yeah, a year before.
Yeah,
yes.
Surgery, general surgery. So, I mean, I had, I think 3 people who got into diagnostic radiology. Yeah, I didn't have that many people who applied for it. I had 3 people that got into pathology, 1 person who got into the Cleveland Clinic for pathology. That was pretty amazing.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That's a big success, actually. I mean, you know what I mean? So, I mean, I want to say something to the candidates. I know, cost is always, this is a valuable investment. That's what I want to say. And for the majority of people coming from other countries, the application cost is one of the reasons why people do not have the capacity to hire mentors like yourself. But if you have decided to really apply to the US residency, starting from the application process, paying for the exam, it's already expensive. And this is a most important step, whether you are gonna get a chance to come here and train in the US programs or not. So I think I would say paying, an extra $1,000, $2,000 is a wise investment than, ending up not matching this year, because you will repeat the cycle next year, and then the costs you try to minimize would come after you next year, and your chances would go down and down as the years go on, even though we say that you have to have the courage to continue applying every year. So I think you need to really sit down and think twice, especially if you are like, an old graduate, if you do have, attempts in exams, if you have failed exams and things like that, if you have the red
Flags.
flags flags in your application, I think it's wise to sit down and think twice, to get somebody like Dr. Parker to work with you. I'm not specifically telling you to sign up with her, but like, I encourage you to think about it. And if you decide to do that, do it today, not tomorrow. Why do I say that? Last year, there was a lot of drama happening in the background. You remember, Dr. Parker, people reaching out to me, hey, please reach out to Dr. Parker in my behalf because I want to work with her. And when you look into the timeline, they are just like, 2 days away from the application deadline. And at that time, Dr. Parker is fully booked, and there is no timeline. So I encourage you. This is a brotherly advice. If you decide to sign up and work with Dr. Parker, the time is now, not tomorrow. The time is now. So stop procrastinating. We have talked about procrastination and all that. Decide, make the decision, sign up today if you want to do that. Otherwise, even if you are working on your application by yourself, do it today. Don't wait until tomorrow. That's the key. So there are other questions, but I think, Dr. Parker, we have spent an hour and 15 minutes already. If you give us about 5 minutes extra, we can go through
Yeah,
that real
but I
quick.
just wanted to let me just address a few things though quickly. There are I do have certain resources online. Okay, so there are, I have a YouTube channel. There are some tapes that are there. I put a new tape on there. Actually, it's on my website, but I guess it wasn't playing as well on the website. And so it's downloaded now on my YouTube channel. I rebranded myself this year. I had been working under IMG Specialist, and I tried to have a bigger umbrella. So now my company is My Application Coach, myapplicationcoach.com. And so if you go to the website, you can download a workbook on personal statements. And what I believe helps a lot of people. I received a lot of positive feedback for that last year. And on the YouTube channel, and then also I'm putting more and more stuff on the channel that's my website. But again, people are telling me that it's easier to look at things on YouTube, so I'll be putting everything on YouTube as well. But my only point is that there's some other resources there too that could help you in the event that you really don't have the resources and stuff like that. At least the financial resources to hire me personally. At least use the things that I do have out there or consider them. Finally, I would tell you that one of the things that I really saw a lot of, I see every year people get into is that they start following in different individuals who themselves might have gotten into residency, or somebody who owns a program who tries to help students, and they go and they look at many different videos on YouTube, on wherever they're posted, and they get conflicting information about how to do things. And then they come to me and they say, well, this video said this and this video said that, and the other one said this, and I don't know what to do, and I'm so confused, and all of that. So there is a lot of information out there, and some of it I don't, not to be in any way negative about colleagues, but I think some of it is not necessarily credible, in the sense that it's an individual who got into a program and this is what they did on their application, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for you. So just, when you're trying to vet information that's out there, just as you would an academic paper or advice that you get about some kind of caring for patients and diagnostic or therapeutic tools, try to figure out the source of where you're getting the information, and if it seems as if they really have the ability to give good advice based more than just on their own personal N=1 experience.
Yes, I completely agree with you. I mean, the limiting factor for the majority of people outside of US is going to be cost, and the most people would be interested to minimize cost. But while doing that, they may end up signing up with, some programs which are not really that genuine and helpful. So be mindful, if you invest some money, you need
Yeah.
to get the services you deserve. So you need to know who is working with you. That's very important. A group of residents or fellows, in the middle of their study, they might tell you, they will guide you, but I don't think that's a wise thing to do. I'm so sorry to say this, because, like, they are distracted. They are not going to give the absolute dedication and full time to go through your applications. You know what I mean? So I think you need to be mindful of those factors as well. I would ask you one final questions. Like, I try to go through the rest of the questions which have been forwarded. So, and I think one of them is very important, because some people want to apply for multiple specialties during this season. For example, somebody might apply for internal medicine, general surgery, and family medicine all at the same time for the upcoming season. So, how do they prepare their personal statement for all these three different programs? What kind of letter of recommendations should they get for each program, and things like that? Because it's a common practice, especially for those people who have done some sort of home based residency or fellowship programs, like just myself.
Right. So, so let me start out by miss my phone. Let me start out by a story because this may be illuminating. Um, I was working with a candidate this year. Had applied. He came on board just to tell me his story in a call, and he said, wow, I applied to five different specialties, and he got 20 interviews. Amazing. He got 20 different interviews, and he had red flags on his application for sure. And I said, well, I guess something, what happened? You got 20 interviews and you didn't match. So there's obviously a problem. 20 interviews should definitely guarantee you a match. I mean, nothing's guaranteed, but it should come close to that. And I said, did you get any feedback? And he said, well, yeah, I got some feedback from a couple of different programs. And they said, when we really went through your application and talked to you, we weren't convinced that you really knew what you wanted, that you didn't really have any direction. And it was all over the place. You weren't committed to anything. Now, that's an extreme story. That is actually a real story. And so when you're applying to multiple specialties, you have unique challenges, especially if the specialties are widely disparate. You can apply to medicine, family medicine, let's say, and pediatrics on an application. You can probably do that. People apply to internal medicine and surgery on an application. Not so easy to do, but you can do that. But when you start applying to more very different programs, you are going to have probably a difficult time. Now, a couple things to say. You obviously have to have different personal statements for different programs, okay? And I don't mean just one line difference. If you're applying to a radiology program, if you're applying to a pathology program, if you're applying to an internal medicine program, when you think about it, they actually require somewhat of a different skill set, right? They require different skills. They should, you need to convince them in your personal statement that you are committed to that specialty, why you have an affinity towards it, what things that you bring, what has informed your decision making, etc. So you have several personal statements that you have to contend with. You can still probably use some of the one personal statement is going to be present in the other, but they're going to be differences. The application is tough because you have to select your experiences very, very carefully so that, and I think that's where really some expert help comes in, because you don't want to pigeonhole your application as if that looks like you're really interested in surgery, but oh, by the way, you're going to apply to some medicine programs just to see. Or you really want to do medicine, but you're going to apply to a few family medicine programs because, that's your second choice. I've had many people tell me these things. And I say, well, family medicine isn't going to take you. You may be an easier match, but it's not an easier match if they don't see that you're committed to family medicine. You'll never get in. So I think it's challenging and it depends on which specialties that you're applying to and how you can sell yourself. And sometimes I tell people, like, maybe you shouldn't apply to 4 specialties. Maybe you should really hone it down so you can have an application that really appeals to the specialties that you're applying to. Think about it if you're the program director reading something like this and you can't figure out what the person wants.
I completely agree with you. I think, people need to come out of their fantasy world, you know what I mean? You want to be a neurosurgeon, and at the same time, you want to be an interventional cardiologist. And hey, no, I want to be also an interventional radiologist. You cannot be everywhere. So, I mean, you have to be practical, see what you can effectively match into. So decide, make a determination, you know what I mean? So make a commitment, and then, go for that one, and increase the chances of matching rather than, like, trying to fly everywhere. So just to be fair, I have been displaying this question for a long time. So let's answer that one, and we'll conclude our session. So Ruth said, in the selection of urban and rural setting preferred for application, we are expected to write why we prefer either of them on ERAS app. Why is this part important?
Well,
that would be our last question for today.
Right. So I've often thought that this was kind of well, I think really what they're trying to get at is when you're asked about, you say, I have no preference. Most of what people will write is something to the extent of, I worked in multiple different settings. I feel comfortable in a rural or a community, rural, suburban, or urban setting. I feel each one has something to provide, and I would be able to adapt to any of these. Sometimes it gives you an opportunity, if you really are interested in a rural setting, let's say, to suggest that why you like that. I've worked in rural settings such as, I've worked in urban settings such as. It just gives some people don't want to work in rural settings, particularly US grads. They may not just feel comfortable at all in a rural setting. And so the program would I think they're trying to tease out people either who really are adaptable and can work anywhere, and any probably person who's an IMG is probably going to say that. They're also going to want to understand whether or not, working in a rural setting means that you're not going to have access so easily to all these other things that you might have in an urban setting. So I don't think it's a very informative question, to be honest with you. But I think if you say you have no preference, I think that you should still write something that you feel comfortable in all those settings. And if you've worked in those settings, you can actually, in the little bit of space that you have, you can demonstrate that.
All right, Dr. Parker, it's really an honor to have you here as always. And I would like to formally congratulate you to the success stories in the 2025 match season. And I hope, the 2026 match cycle would be more productive and more successful. And I hope we'll be celebrating the successes together soon enough. And I wish all candidates throughout the world to be successful in this upcoming matching season. So I thank you, Dr. Parker, again, in the name of myself, as well as all our viewers from different corners of the world. And this video would be available on my LinkedIn page, on my YouTube channel, as well as on my Facebook. So those of you who are following me on LinkedIn, you can easily find it on LinkedIn. And if Dr. Parker posts it under her page, that's also be very helpful. And probably in the future, if you get some time, Dr. Parker, we will have entirely question and answer sessions in the future in between when we find the time. What do you think about that?
I think that's fine. And I think, most importantly, as I look at the application cycle, there's 2 parts to it. There's all this getting your application ready and all that. And then there's preparing for interviews.
Yes.
And that's a whole other topic. But that's something that is equally, or if not more important in a way, because there's a set of criteria that gets you to the interview. And then the interview itself, it means everything in the world in terms of where you're going to get on that rank list. All the other accomplishments that you have, sure, they're still under consideration, but but the top categories of things that are going to matter in the ranking process are going to be how you come across in that interview with the program director, with the faculty, with the residents, you know, what your communication style is, your confidence level, your likability, your ease of expression, your confidence, those sorts of things. So I can't overestimate, I can't
emphasize.
Lost for words. How important that that part of the process is.
Yes.
Yeah,
So I mean, you know, we'll look into those possibilities, and like, you know, if time allows, we would come back and talk to you guys and try to answer your questions. And the other thing is, I would like to remind you the fact that we have done a lot of videos. At least there are 4 valuable discussions which we have done last year, and those are still valid. You can go back in time and watch those interviews with the discussions with Dr. Parker, and you will get a lot of information about the different stages of the application session. So I encourage everybody to go back and watch those discussions we had with Dr. Parker. Thank you, Dr. Parker. If you don't have anything to add or say at the end, then we'll conclude our today's session here.
No, just thanks for the invite again, and good luck to everybody in this community.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. Have a blessed rest of your day. All right, guys. So, I mean, I think we had a very productive discussion with Dr. Parker as always, and I really appreciate her for coming here and addressing our questions and sharing her valuable insights on this important, you know, topic or matter, US residency application. That's very important to many of you guys. So, if you do have questions, you know, you can always reach out, but at the same time, don't ask me to be your primary mentor, because I can't do it, and the only thing I can do to help you guys is just to come up with sessions like this one so that we can address your questions in group like this one, because, you know, I cannot really respond to each and every individual, and I cannot, you know, answer your individualized questions personally to everybody. So it's not possible. It's practically impossible to me due to my lifestyle, you know, busy schedules and things like that, a lot of responsibility in the background. So please be mindful of that, and I hope you understand me on that regard. እሺ እንግዲህ በቃ ለአንድ ሰዓት ተኩል ነው ከምናምን ያህል ለእናንተ ስል በእንግሊዘኛ ራሴን ቶርቸር አድርጌ ያለው ትንሽ እንግዲህ እንደ ልቤ ፈታ ብዬ በማወራበት በአማርኛ የተወሰነ መልእክት ልጨምርላችሁ ወደው አፕላይ የምታደርጉ ሰዎች እንግዲህ እግዚአብሔር ይርዳችሁ። በምትችሉት መጠን የምትችሉትን ለማድረግ ሞክሩ። ማድረግ የማትችሉትን መለወጥ የማትችሉት ነገር ላይ ጊዜ ባታባክኑ መልካም ነው። ለምሳሌ እድሜያችሁን መለወጥ አትችሉም፣ ወንድ ሴት መሆናችሁን መለወጥ አትችሉም፣ የተመረቃችሁበትን ጊዜ ወይም የሮፍ ግራጁዌሽናችሁን መለወጥ አትችሉም፣ የመጣችሁበትን ሀገር መለወጥ አትችሉም። if you are Ethiopian, you are Ethiopian. If you got trained in Ethiopia, you got trained in Ethiopia. These things you cannot change. ቪዛ አግኝታችሁ እዚህ መታችሁ ስቴፕ 3 መፈተን ካልቻላችሁ እሱ መለወጥ አትችሉም። ዩኤስ ክሊኒካል ኤክስፔሪየንስ ከሌላችሁ እሱ መለወጥ አትችሉም። ባላችሁ ነገር ግን እንዴት አይለ የተሻለ ካንዲዴት መሆን እንደምትችሉ ማሰብ ይቻላል ማለት ነው። እሱ ላይ ነው መስራት ያለባችሁ እና በተቻለ መጠን እሱን ማይንድፉል ሁኑ። እስካሁን ድረስ ኤራስ አፕሊኬሽናችሁ ላይ መስራት ያልጀመራችሁ ልጆች ካላችሁ ወይም ካንዲዴትስ ካላችሁ አይ ቲንክ ዘ ታይም ኢዝ ናው። አሁኑኑ ቶሎ ብላችሁ ወደ ስራ መግባት ይኖርባችኋል ማለት ነው። በጣም ሌት በሆነ ቁጥር ፐርሰናል ስቴትመንታችሁ የምትጽፉት በጣም ፑር ኳሊቲ ይሆናል። አፕሊኬሽናችሁ የምትጽፉት በጣም ፑር ኳሊቲ ይሆናል። ስለዚህ ዘ ኤርሊየር ዘ ቤረር። ባለቀ ሰዓት ስክራምብል ማድረግ የለባችሁም። ሌተር ኦፍ ሪኮመንዴሽን ሌተር የሚጽፉላችሁንም ሰዎች ኤርሊ ኦን ሪች አውት ማድረግ ይኖርባችኋል ማለት ነው። ያለበለዚያ በጣም ዴድላይኑ ሲደርስ ይጽፉልናል ያላችኋቸው ሰዎች ሁሉ they could be busy, they may be out on vacation, they may be somewhere and they may not be able to help you in any way. ስለዚህ ብሌም ማድረግም ይከብዳል። ዲስሪስፔክትፉልም ነው፣ ሪስፔክትፉልም አይደለም። ባለቀ ሰዓት መጥቶ ይሄ ዴድላይኑ የዛሬ 5 ቀን ነው፣ ይሄን ሌተር ኦፍ ሪኮመንዴሽን በ5 ቀን ጻፍልኝ ወይ የሪኮመንዴሽን ሌተር በሶስት ቀን ውስጥ መግባት አለበት። ዴድላይኑ የዛሬ 3 ቀን ነው፣ ዛሬውኑ ውለድ እንደዚህ አይባልም። አይ ሚን ዩ ኖ ፒፕል አር ቢዚ እና ባለጉዳዩ ጊዜ ሰጥተህ በጊዜ ያልሰራውን ነገር መጨረሻ ላይ የሚጽፍልህ ሰው ጫንቃ ላይ መጫን አትችልም ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ ይሄንን ማይንድፉል ሆኑ እንግዲህ እንደ ፊውቸር አሚን እንደዚህ አይነት ሴሽን ተጠርቶም ብዙ ሰው አይመጣም አንፎርቹኔትሊ። ከዛ ኢንዲቪጁዋሊ ትመጡና ዶክተር ሜንተሬ ብትሆን እንደው በጣም ደስ ይለኛል ብትመክረኝ፣ እንደው ደውለህ ብትመክረኝ። ካኖት ሀፕን። እንደዚህ አይነት ሴሽን ፎር ኤቭሪባዲ ሲዘጋጅ የት አላችሁ? አትመጡ። ጭልጥ ብላችሁ የትም ትጠፉና ከዛ በኋላ ለክ ማጣፊያው ሲያጥራችሁ ነው መታችሁ እባክህ ውለደኝ፣ እባክህ ደውልልኝ፣ እባክህ አይሆንም። ስለዚህ አስቀድሜ አሁን ማስታወቂያ ሰርቻለሁ ቲክታክም ላይ አስቀድሜ ሊንክዲን ላይ ለጥፍ ያለው ሴሽን እንዳለ 28 ሰው ነው ግን አሁን ዩቲዩብ ላይ የማየው ማለት ነው። አይ ቲንክ ፌስቡክ ላይ አንድ ሰው ነበር ወጥቷል። ስለዚህ 28 ካንዲዴት ብቻ ነው ያለው አይደለም። ስለዚህ የኛ ካልቸር መጥፎ ካልቸር ምንድነው? በቃ በውስጥ መንሾካሾክ እንወዳለን። በቃ ዋን ቱ ዋን እንወዳለን። that is not going to happen። ቁርጡን ነው የምነግራችሁን ለመናገር it can't happen. I cannot call everybody and guide ኤንአርጊ ማለት አልችልም። it's impossible። እና ኦፖርቹኒቲውን ተጠቀሙበት። ሼር ማድረግ ልመዱ። ደግሞ አሁን ሊንክዲን ላይ ታያላችሁ። ሪፖስት ብታረጉ ምን ይጎዳችኋል? ሪፖስት ብታረጉ በእናንተ ስር ያሉ እኔም ፎሎ የሚያደርጉ ያዩታል ማለት ነው። it's not about me by the way። እና 1 ሰዓት ተኩል ማለት valuable time ነው የራሴን ስራ ባደረግበት ማለት ነው። እና አንዳንድ ጊዜ በጣም ፓርቲሲፔት ማድረግ ላይ በጣም ዳተኝነት ያለው እና ይሄንንም ብትለውጡ በጣም መልካም ነው። በተቻለ መጠን አይዘር ማይሰልፍ ወይንም ደግሞ መሳይ ዶክተር መሳይ አለ እሱም ጊዜ የሚያገኝ ከሆነ እንደዚህ መተን የተወሰነ ላይቭ ሴሽን ወይ በቲክታክም እንደዚህ በቲክታክ ገብቻለሁ። ግን ያው ቲክታክ ላይ አብዛኛው ሰው ሐኪም አይደለም። ይሄ ፕሮግራምን ብዙውን ሰው አይመለከተውም። ግን ወደ 99 ሰው አለ። ቲክታክም ይሻላል ከተባለ በቲክታክ ላይ ኪውኤንኤ አንሰር አድርገን እየገባችሁ የምትጠይቁበትንም ነገር ማመቻቸት ይቻላል ማለት ነው። ያንን እናደርጋለን። በተረፈ እንግዲህ ሀሳባችሁ ሁሉ እንዲሳካላችሁና የምታስቡት የምታቀዱት ቦታ እንድትደርሱ እግዚአብሔር እንዲረዳችሁ ከልቤ እመኝላችኋለሁ። ስለነበረን ጊዜ ሁላችሁንም መታችሁ ፓርቲሲፔት ያደረጋችሁትን፣ ጥያቄ በመጠየቅ የተሳተፋችሁትን፣ መልካም ሀሳባችሁን የገለጻችሁትን ሁሉ ከልቤ እያመሰገንኩኝ የዛሬውን ሴሽናችንን በዩቲዩብ እና በፌስቡክ እንዲሁም በሊንክዲን ላይ የማስተላልፈውን ፕሮግራም በዚህ ጨርሳለሁ። እስቲ ቲክታክ ላይ የቲክታክ ወዳጆቼን ያው እኔን አክብረው ቁጭ ብለው እየጠበቁ ስለነበረ የተወሰነ ጊዜ ወስጄ ሰላም እላቸዋለሁ ማለት ነው። በተረፈ ቸርን ሰንብት። ኦል ዘ ቤስት። ባይ ባይ።